All right, welcome. How are you doing, Ian? Great to see you.
Great to see you, Al, as always.
Hey, thanks for doing this, and I'm excited to talk with you. We did a podcast recently, so if
Yep.
you're just joining us, check that out. I actually put it on LinkedIn, the link to that podcast. You can listen to it on your favorite podcast player. And so, just for format purposes, so you can prepare yourself as you're joining, Ian is going to talk about productizing people analytics over the first 20 to 30 minutes, depending on the questions that come in. However, we are going to leave the last 20 minutes or so for Q&A to open it up for discussion. Also, to prep you all, because we get the question all the time, will the slides be made available? They will not. This is proprietary content. This is fueling this discussion exclusively. So be sure to be mindful of the, respect the content with screenshots and all that, because Ian has put a lot of work into this. So with that, Ian, you want to introduce yourself a bit, and then we'll get into it?
Yeah, sure, Al. Thank you. I guess the super short version is, Keith, I'm a people analytics and tech leader. I've been in industry for a little over 20 years. And in the press, I'll cover off on some of the orgs that I've built people analytics programs and teams at. But I guess generally I would say I've spent my entire career, whether it's in consulting or on the corporate side, kind of at this intersection of science and analytics, process and technology to help create a better employee experience. And I'm excited to talk more about that today, specific to people analytics productization.
Yeah, well, we talked about it out Terreo, so I got a sneak peek. So I'm going to get out of your way and let you get into it. You want to share your slides, and I'll put those up, and I'm going to disappear for a bit, and I'll come back when you wrap up.
Yeah, you just keep me honest here, Al. Make sure I get this right.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah.
And you have the full screen now, yeah?
We have it, and it is now visible to everybody. So, and like I said, I'm going to disappear, but I'll be in the background. So get after it. Enjoy.
Great. Thanks, Al. Thanks, everybody, for dialing in today. Appreciate you on the East Coast who are spending your lunch hour with me, and on the West Coast, maybe you're having a cup of coffee. So again, I'm excited to talk a little bit today about how I've seen people analytics products kind of make their way into the HR ecosystem and create value in ways that I think are really important going forward. So I have, like I said a few minutes ago, spent the last 20 some odd years in this space, starting off in consulting at Deloitte, and then moving into financial services at American Express, and then a variety of orgs that kind of span Wall Street to Main Street, retail at Sears, retail again at Amazon, obviously tech with Amazon and Google. And more recently, I'm working with the Semperviren's venture capital fund in an advisory capacity, and working with startup founders in this workforce tech and people analytics space. So it's been a really vibrant space that I've been privileged to be in for quite some time and to see evolve over the years. Productization, I would think we're all pretty familiar with this definition, to make a service or a concept into a product. But when we think about people analytics, which has for many years been the purview of people analytics. So I would venture to put forward a slightly different definition of productization in the context of people analytics. And as I see it, it's about introducing insights and personalized recommendations into software applications that HR manages and into the transactional workflows of those software applications to inform and not replace human judgment at scale. So with that in mind, there's kind of 4 questions and sections that I want to take us through today. And the first is where you prioritize your people analytics efforts, how you choose the problems that are worth going after amidst the entire kind of gamut of HR services and processes that you could put your team's efforts towards. The second, and closely related, is your customer. Who are they, and what do you need to build for them or buy for them? Otherwise, that kind of put in production for them. Third is, why should the org come along for this ride? Why should they trust you? How will you keep your deployments and your introduction of new products and services on the rails from a change management and a stakeholder buy-in perspective? And then last but certainly not least, as you've prioritized your efforts, zoned in on customer problems we're solving with build or buy solutions that you'll manage with guiding principles, how do you implement and get your products and your solutions over the line from a partnership perspective? So we'll talk a little bit more about that today. And last but not least, I've on every slide, almost every slide of this presentation, there's a generative AI Easter egg, so to speak. During the Q&A, we'll see if anybody can spot it, and extra bonus points to those who do. So let's go. In this section, like I said a minute ago, we're going to zoom out and talk about where to start. And with all the different domains within HR, recruiting, compensation, career development, return to office, what's the specific problem that you're going to solve? How do you identify and prioritize the use case? And in my experience, I've found that prioritization often comes down to a couple key levers. This is not an exclusive and exhaustive list, but I found these levers to be really incisive and helpful when you're prioritizing which use cases to go after from an analytics perspective in HR. The first is to work backwards from your customer. Sometimes in people analytics, practitioners and scientists, researchers, model builders, we can kind of fall in love with the complexity of a problem or a challenge of a particular analytic exercise. And it might turn out that that issue is not as big a problem for the org as we think it is. And the juice may not be worth the squeeze, so to speak. So the moral here is, do not do science for science sake. Know who your ultimate customer is. And by that, I mean a frontline manager of teams greater than 100, or a software engineer who has been with the org less than 12 months, or year-on-year top performers who may be at risk of leaving the company. Be very specific about who your customers are and work backwards from something that really matters to them and is not just interesting to you from a practitioner perspective. The second point I'd call up is enduring truth. So a lot of times when we prioritize, we tend to think about focusing on what's changing. Return to office and hybrid work are really good examples of this. These are important, but I think it's really helpful to think about what's actually not changing, what will almost always certainly be true. So for instance, it's really hard to imagine it ever being true that employees would want more bureaucracy, less transparency, and more friction when it comes to their career development and growth, right? So if you have HR processes and programs where you find enduring truths being violated, that's probably a very good place to invest some time and prioritize, because you're probably solving for pain that might be going unspoken in the organization. The third lever I'd call out is cross-domain initiatives. These are multipliers and force multipliers. So don't limit your thinking to individual HR domains, perhaps predetermined based on the org chart. Think in terms of the employee journey and how they experience the organization, if they are your customer, which I would hope they would be. So for instance, talent evaluation and compensation, separate domains usually, but almost certainly experienced together by managers and employees during year-end review. And you could say the same of teams, culture, return to office. The diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging agenda is another example that kind of cuts across and permeates everything. So again, don't let the HR org chart constrain your thinking, your scoping, and your prioritization of how people analytics can improve the employee experience. And last but not least, this is a bit of an Amazon thing, and it has to do with working in a federated analytics environment, an environment where you, the people analytics leader and the team, you may not be fully centralized and fully control all the analytics happening in HR. Federated hybrid models are very, very common. So 2 is greater than 0. This means that when you have a problem without a solution, 2 solutions or more than one solution, 2 or more, might be better than none, right? We often get a little antsy about duplication of efforts, but if there's nothing in place now to solve a problem, 2 solutions is better than none. But if you can get that to 1 solution, that's better than having multiple versions. So I would concede that more than 1 solution is not ideal in a target state, but to get going and to figure out how best to solve this problem, having multiple versions of a solution is a good starting point. And don't let that get in the way of getting down to 1 ultimately for your customers' experience. Okay, so we just talked about prioritization. In this section, I want to spend some time talking about customers, who they are, and what you're building or buying for them as a people analytics team. And for this, we take a human-centered view into what actually goes into productizing insights that your team is generating. So naturally, when we think about our customers, we think about human beings. We think about human-centered design based on their experience in the org, and not perhaps based on a process as a customer and optimizing for that process. Optimize for what people experience in the org, being a people analytics team. And these people are managers, they're employees, leaders, HR professionals, and they have questions about their teams, about individuals on the team, about effectiveness, about the well-being of the org. And this radiates across all the different decision points they have, from hiring to comp, reorganizations, org design. So to do all these things, as we know, our customers, our managers and employees, they use applications, they use software applications. Sometimes there's many points of entry in the software suite in HR. Sometimes there's kind of one main point of entry. Perhaps you've recently moved to Oracle or Workday, or perhaps you have a number of applications across a number of markets that have been kind of homegrown and hosted over time. But whatever the case is, I think it's important to acknowledge that people analytics can help these humans make high judgment decisions and actions by virtue of doing, generally speaking, 4 things. I think a people analytics team that's full stack tends to be literate in terms of these 4 capability areas and has a depth of skill and practitioner expertise in these 4 areas. Really quick, because these can go deep and we could spend a full day on this page alone. But data, this has to do with the data strategy of the organization, the data management practices, how data is generated, acquired, the definitions that data objects carry, the quality review routines that you have, lineage, data catalogs, the governances that you have surrounding your data. So you may own this as a people analytics leader. You may be part of a broader kind of data management and strategy and governance system in line with the broader tech strategy of the organization. But how good and how reliable and foundational your data strategy and management practices are is really, really important from an analytics perspective to start. Infrastructure would include how you have built your stack for data storage, for data computation, the pipelines that you've built between data producing systems, the performance of your storage and compute environments, security, permissions, data curation for analytics and modeling. This would all go into the infrastructure space. Insight covers things like data queries, exploratory data analysis, trend analysis, forecasting, time series. We could go on all day, but up to and including machine learning and now AI and moreover generative AI. And then in this last space, which I call activation or products. This would be your products and the services that you're providing to the organization. So how you activate these insights through products like ad hoc reporting, through KPIs, metrics, reporting, dashboards, surveys, listening, predictions, machine learning recommendations and nudges. This all goes into kind of that activation or product space within the people analytics team. There's a lot of different ways to slice this, but I think these four hang together from the application side to the end user side pretty well. So just kind of taking a quick walk around this wheel. In the data space, you can expect to see, as a people analytics team, data that's created all the time in streams, perhaps from user activity within a software application, or irregularly in a batch format, perhaps weekly, monthly, that could land in a lake, for instance. And all the data that's being produced by applications and data producing systems needs to be housed in an infrastructure environment that could include a warehouse, for instance, with data curation layers, different schemas, different kind of semantic layers in your data model that analysts and data scientists can then apply business intelligence protocols to for metric generation, report generation, or they can pull from curated data layers for predictive modeling to create nudges and predictions, and even kind of experimental design A/B services that then, importantly, whether it's on the machine learning, data science side, on the business intelligence side, this product activation space needs to, I very strongly believe, connect back to your applications that you use to have managers make the decisions we talked about earlier. This would also connect to your data marts, your data depots, your platforms, if you've gone that route, say a Vizier or a Cruncher, for instance. So I'm not suggesting a team builds all of this and then works in-house with tech teams to manually kind of product integrate every single output of people analytics. That is a model in some orgs, but moreover, these hard connection lines here are going to be how you connect your own analytics with your own products, or analytics that are curated for you on a platform that you might buy and license in with other software application decision flows that exist within the organization. So when that happens and you have insights that are kind of contextualized in the right applications and process flows that managers use to make all kinds of decisions, you then have the right information to the right person in the right moment. And that creates, among other things, what I would call cultural unlocks for better employee experiences. And that is where humans and their judgment and their understanding of team context and the different circumstances and factors that influence those decisions that the data itself won't contextualize. This is where you as a people analytics team can kind of bring that data in insightful format full circle for them to do better, smarter, higher judgment, more data informed things with. There's tons of examples we could go through of how this flow from data to infrastructure to insights to product activation works. But I think as people analytics professionals, we probably all could relate to what this could show up to mean in terms of recruiting, in terms of comp, in terms of performance. And we can talk more about any specific examples you'd like in the Q&A. So third section, we just talked about customers and what you're building or buying or both for them. A lot of this could be new for the organization. And so in this section, well, the roadmap for building and buying some of this, we need to consider the principles by which we operate as a team. We're dealing in some of the most sensitive data in the organization, people data, and we're putting it on display in analytical, insightful ways. We need to create trust with end users to do that responsibly. So how do you do that? How do you guide your decision making along those lines? How do you productively debate technical trade-offs and navigate cultural tensions probably that come from introducing first of kind changes in the organization at times? So the answer to that is we use design principles. We use design principles that are human-centered. They're non-negotiable. You might call them guiding principles. Amazon calls them tenets, but in no particular order. Actually, this is in a little bit of a debatable order. I think there are 6 that really resonate for me when productizing people analytics. So in a kind of a soft order of importance, do no harm. This is an offshoot of the late great George Box, statistician, who in the 70s said that all models are wrong, but some are useful. And I think in the context of people analytics, we take that to mean that you must concede that there will be some level of inaccuracy associated with, say, data science predictions and model outputs. But you need to make sure that whatever approach you're taking and kind of methodology you're using, you need to be mindful that you're doing more good than harm, and that you're not putting forward recommendations or insights that might trigger a behavioral response or an action that is very difficult to walk back and could be harmful if misinterpreted. So do no harm is a great guiding principle to kind of start off with and bear in mind throughout your entire production cycle. The second, and closely related, is focused on equitable outcomes and fairness by design, to ensure that your models and your experiments and your research aims to de-bias talent outcomes across gender, ethnicity, and other protected classes. And it includes a deep understanding of the data and the associated processes and research on how bias can creep into the decisions and the outputs that you're looking to inform. So anticipating cognitive biases in hiring and compensation administration and promotion based on research, and also based on a quantitative review of your outputs is super important when you're looking to put something into production at scale for your customers. Banish black boxes. So think about this as embracing transparent and accessible methods. It means not hiding or obfuscating what you're doing from your partners and your customers, pure and simple. You're publishing your research plan, you're stating your hypotheses, you're making your results available to the extent that you can share data, either aggregate, probably not granular data given confidentiality, but be transparent about what you're doing and why, and what you're not doing and why. Options considered but not pursued, etc. And keep the bar very, very high for scientific standards, for inspection and peer review. So by banishing black boxes, I think you accomplish that. Fourth is around trust. So when you are debating, say, a model that is accurate and very interpretable versus, and it might be simple, versus a more complex model that's slightly more accurate and less interpretable, err on the side of simplicity, err on the side of parsimony. And if your customers don't understand your science, chances are they probably won't inherently trust it either. Bet on that. You might be pleasantly surprised to be wrong on occasion there, but I would encourage you to err on the side of simplicity, especially when you're venturing into uncharted territory and first of kind solutions, and meet your customers where they are, and just make it easy for them to get it by being simple to build their trust. Partnerships. I'll talk more about this in the last section, but this essentially means to say that beyond just partnering, that as a people analytics team, do not rush ahead out in front of your partners and pull them in at the last minute. Partners like product management, software engineering, UX design, legal, compliance, line leads, they all have really, really valuable perspectives to help shape and iterate your starting point solutions into stronger releases subsequently. So involve them early and often, and that will pay dividends down the line from a quality standpoint, but also from a change management standpoint. And it also puts into full relief for your customers that the analytics team is not building in a silo and concedes rightfully that we don't have all the answers, that we need these other capabilities and expertise to weigh in on how we best implement a solution for the organization. So partnership before productionization is an absolute must. And I'll talk about that a little bit more again in the last section. And then the final lever, which is not an original, this is from Eric Ries, who published in 2011, The Lean Startup, which I'm sure many of you have read. Simply put, to launch your cool idea to a subset of the organization, to get feedback fast and then iterate and make changes, this will build momentum. This will kick off the change management process for you. And if you come out of the gate to the entire company all at once with a new solution, you only get one shot at that to get it right. So it's super risky. It carries a ton of change management overhead, and smaller than you might think is available. Starting smaller than you think what might be available is a great way to test and learn and fail forward, so to speak. So think big, start small, scale fast. One of the best guiding principles I can think of in combination with these others as you think about productization of your analytics for your customers. Okay, last section. We're almost there. The way to get this over the line, to get a new nudge, a new prediction, a data mart, a depot, anything that might come out of your people analytics shop to meet your customer needs, needs to be guided with principles that we talked about, but it also does require a ton of partnership and a village to operationalize and launch. And this is often where I think people analytics teams declare victory once they've completed, say, their analytics or research cycles and haven't really fully accounted for getting the last couple of the last push over the line, if you will, in partnership with many different teams throughout HR and tech. So in my experience, I've seen generally there's two types of categories of partnership to consider when you think about getting your work fully operationalized and productized and over the line. The first category involves deep technical subject matter reviews and readiness discussions operationally. And the second is more broad. It's more strategic in terms of leadership reviews, cultural debates and readiness, overall, how much change can we absorb? And the first, again, just kind of flipping back, technically, again, not a fully exhaustive list, but by and large, in addition to the science that your people analytics team is putting forward in conversations that would include like model trade-offs, experimentation, key performance indicators, software engineering, product design, product management, UX design, legal. These are deep technical areas that your people analytics team probably doesn't have that much experience in or exposure to. More and more, I see that some teams are hiring designers. They're managing their own products. They might even have a lawyer on staff. But by and large, these technical areas are out of scope for most people analytics teams. And as you're embarking on an analysis with intent to kind of build something and release something new to the organization, I'd encourage you to keep these groups in mind, keep them looped in early, especially if you're going into kind of a full production or product integration mode with your solutions. And then secondly, the support that you will get and the mileage you will get and the permission, frankly, that you'll get to launch will not typically come from the first group. Whether you're able to will come from the first group. Whether you should, if you could, comes from the second bucket here, which includes your line leaders, both business and HR, business unit presidents, and importantly, managers and employees. If you're not building and creating feedback cycles along the way with these groups, I think your odds of success lower tremendously. And importantly, you're not probably doing what you need to do to ensure that the solutions you're creating for, say, managers as a customer or employees as a customer really is useful for them, that it does empower them, that it is personalized to them, and it creates more choice and trust and a better experience overall than they're having with said problem today. So as you both technically and go down the path of productizing your people analytics, in addition to the partnership piece, it takes us full circle to kind of a big question. And the big question that some of you have heard me talk about before is, if you knew the answer to the problem statement that you've identified as important, what would you literally do differently if you knew the answer to that question? What would you do to act intentionally to positively change a specific process or a product or a program or procedure, a platform, roles, responsibilities with respect to people? This is how you activate not just your analytics from a product standpoint, but how you bring it to life in the ecosystem of all that HR touches in the workplace. And so if your solutions are not kind of pointing to changes in some of these spaces, I'd encourage you to rethink that. Because you might be missing a beat of how you can make your analytics not just insightful and customer-centric, but really sticky and durable in the organization. So this question is really key. And it's also not the only question. I think when we consider what we could change, we don't want to do that, like I talked about a minute ago, in isolation, blindly, without really thorough consideration of what partner teams will have to bring to bear on the solution. So in addition to what we think analytic insight can inform vis-a-vis product, program, policy, et cetera, changes, I think another question to consider, a slight variation, is what we do thoughtfully with partner teams, understanding the potential of our analytics and maybe even the limitations of our science that we have to lean into our partner teams to help us solve for. So people analytics will not have all the answers. It'll point us down a direction that could inform material changes to some of these great box items here, but only if we work in concert with partner teams throughout the org to make change systemic and durable, and not just a flash in the pan out of the people analytics lab. So with that, I think we're close to half past. I'll pause for a breath and take some questions. There's a couple ways to keep in touch with me if you want to chat more about this. But otherwise, Al, I think we're good to start a conversation with the team here. Are we all still here? Hello? Can anyone hear me, see me? I think we're having some technical difficulty here. All right, team, if you can hear me, see me, I'm going to log out. I'm not seeing anything or hearing anything. So I'll be right back if I'm coming through to you. Just bear with me.